My non-biblical reading this morning, my spiritual reading this morning, is from a book called The Endless Practice by Mark Nepo. Every spiritual tradition leads us through suffering to the mystical moment when we're asked to put down all protection and relax the boundaries of our identity so we can be touched by the unity of life that waits under everything, and so grow and be changed. Though we're always moving forward, the peak moments of living, those moments that change everything and sustain everything, permeate us because we go deep, not forward. To open this depth requires facing sacred moments, which are everywhere, in the music we fall into, in the sudden truth that stops us, in the realization that what we've been carrying is ready to be born. Entering such moments completely lets us feel and taste the universal being that brings all things alive. And facing sacred moments requires us to engage the paradox of being ourselves and losing ourselves.
Reading this morning is from Luke chapter 24, verses 1 through 12. On the first day of the week, at the first sign of dawn, the woman came to the tomb bringing the spices they had prepared. They found the stone rolled back from the tomb, but when they entered the tomb, they didn't find the body of Jesus. While they were still at a loss over what to think of this, two figures in dazzling garments stood beside them. Terrified, the woman bowed to the ground. The two said to them, "Why do you search for the living one among the dead? Jesus is not here, Christ has risen. Remember what Jesus said to you while still in Galilee, that the chosen one must be delivered into the hands of sinners and be crucified, and on the third day would rise again." With this reminder, the words of Jesus came back to them. When they had returned from the tomb, they told all of these things to the 11 and the others. The women were Mary of Magdalene, Joanna, and Mary, the mother of James. The other women with them also told the apostles, but the story seemed like nonsense, and they refused to believe them. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. He stooped down, but he could see nothing but the wrappings. So he went away, full of amazement at what had occurred.
Would you pray with me? God of renewal and opportunities, possibilities in new life, help us to feel energized by your Spirit this morning. Help us to feel alive and to embrace life. Help us to be present in this moment, to receive what your Spirit has to offer each of us. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be filled with your insight and your wisdom. Amen. So I'd like us to consider the Easter story in two different ways. The first way we can consider it is historical, and the second is as a parable. If we consider it as historical fact, then it's as if everything from that story really happened. As if we could go back in time and we could take our cell phone, right? And we could take pictures of all of it, and we could record all of it, and it would have happened exactly that way. Or we can understand it as a parable. And the intent of a parable is never to be factual, although it might be. But the intent of a parable is to to teach us. The importance of a parable is its meaning. So, I struggle with the historical perspective. Maybe it works for you, and that's fine. I struggle with it because there are many unbelievable pieces about this story, and there are at least 4 different versions of it, one in each of the Gospels. So, I'm going to approach it as a parable. To think about what is the important message for us today, for our lives in this moment, that we can learn from this story. And if we each, tried to do that, we'd probably have 60 different messages today, which is wonderful. It's the way Scripture comes alive. I'm sure I've preached on many different concepts and ways to understand this day. Today I'm going to talk about one that I'm sure we've all heard before, and it's simply that concept of transformation. For those of us who went through the Day of Tears experience, or Good Friday, if you're not familiar that I've changed the name of it, if you went through that with us, you touched the suffering and the struggle and the pain and the heartache of that night. And we come here today, looking for hope, right? As something new. It's a transforming day. It's a day where all of the sadness and grief and pain and suffering suddenly finds that this isn't the end. That there's still more to life. That there's still second chances. Frankly, I like to look at these 3 kind of high holy days all as metaphors. Palm Sunday and the Day of Tears and Easter. That they're all metaphors for our life, right? We have days that are all Palm Sunday days. They're days when we're celebrating and the world is our oyster. It's a really weird saying, and I don't know where that came from right now. But it's the problem with preaching without notes. The world is my oyster. But there are possibilities and potentials out there that you thought were gone. And now there's hope for the future. Think about graduations and weddings and baptisms and those kinds of days where the future just looks bright. And then we have those days that are our Day of Tears days, those Good Friday days, the days where we're sad and we're lost and we're empty and we're depressed and we're angry and we're suffering and we're hurt and we're despairing, where there feels like it is only darkness and there is no hope. Where there are just tears. We have those days. And then we have Easter days. Easter days where we never thought we could really engage life again in the same way. Easter days where suddenly there's a second chance where we didn't think we had a second chance. Where suddenly we feel like maybe I can go on living. Maybe there will be joy again. Maybe I will find love again. All of those things exist in our lives. Let's talk about Day of Tears moments for just an itty bit. When we experience those days where we're racked with grief or we're struggling with rejection or betrayal or hurt or illness or whatever it is, when we're caught in those tears, how do you feel when you have to go out into the world? How do you feel about being with other people? How do you feel about living life again? Not so much.
No.
You're numb. Do you want to engage with others? No. How many of us want to pull in and hide and isolate? It's a natural thing for us to do when we've hit those Day of Tears. The interesting thing is that Jesus never did that. don't see him pulling away and pulling back and refusing to engage. He lived life wide open, arms wide open, embracing it all, never holding other people's at arm's length, not, turning away friends and family and refusing to offer love, not isolating or being angry or getting caught up in bitterness and grief and striking out at people around him. He lived life wide open, even though he dealt with all of the worst that life has to offer. The line that struck me from our passage today that Robin read was the question of the angel. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? Why are you looking for the living among the dead? What if that message is for us? What if the question is for us? Have we become, or are there days where we become the living, still stuck among the dead? There are all kinds of deaths in our lives. Factual ones and figurative ones, large ones and small ones. They happen all the time. And it can be easy to get stuck in the day of tears. It can be easy to isolate and pull back. It can be easy to stay among the dead instead of living wide open, arms embracing the world. It can be easy to hide from our friends and our family. It can be easy to be caught up in fear and not want to try it again. But if there's one thing that Easter has to say, it's that life goes on. And we're called to live it, to embrace it, wide open. There's a story. One thought before I go there. So I know that life is hard. I know that awful stuff happens. I know that we have awful experiences and tough times. And we have those days of being in the tomb, right? If we think about the metaphor continuing of this week. We have our days in the tombs, and maybe those are necessary. Maybe those are necessary for us to mourn and to grieve and to rest or to be angry or to just stop for a little while. But eventually, hopefully, we will be confronted with the open door to the tomb, and the question is, do we walk out or do we stay in? And that becomes a choice. And I know there can be power in staying in. I know somehow that can give us something. Maybe it's a meaning or a purpose to stay in those tombs. Maybe it's a fear of letting go of who am I going to be if I leave this tomb. But life calls us to leave it and to move on. And in that reading from Mark Nepo, he says, if you're going to embrace the sacred moments of life, the beautiful, wonderful moments, whether it's the music, Karen, or whether it's the deer in the ditch, or whether it's flowers, or whatever it is, if you're going to embrace those moments, sometimes it requires the paradox of losing yourself and being yourself at the same time. You have to lose and let go of some of those things that are holding you back to fully be present in the energy and the beauty of the moment. It's a woman by the name of Wabunrat, who, if you looked at her, you'd think she was perfectly normal. If you look a little closer, you'll find that she has a prosthetic leg from stepping on a landmine when she was out hunting for bamboo with her brother and her sister and her father, not far from their village in Thailand. She had 69 stalks, and she needed one more before she could go home. And she reached for that stalk, and she stepped on a landmine. The explosion had her sister and brother running to get to her, and she called them and she said, no, don't come, because there could be more. So she crawled herself 50 meters to a place where she was safe. They took her to the hospital. And when she woke up, she found that her left leg was gone below the knee. She had 2 small children. Her husband divorced her not soon after that because she lost her leg. And so she was left as a single mom trying to care for these children. And life was really, really hard. She said it took her 7 or 8 days to do what it took a quote-unquote normal person, maybe only a day. But with courage and with resilience and with determination and with hope, she pushed on. And she kept going. And eventually she was invited to be part of some training and some education in their region for people with disabilities. And she met other people who had worse problems than she had. And eventually she became the chairperson for their local chapter of people with disabilities organization. And as time went on, she began to represent Thailand as a landmine survivor, internationally, nationally. And you know what she told people? I don't want to get it wrong. It's simple, but what she said was, I may be disabled, but my heart isn't. I may be disabled, but my heart isn't. She didn't let herself get stuck in the day of tears. Oh, she went through it. But when presented with that open door to the tomb, she walked through. She said, I have life yet to live. And with arms wide open, she embraced what she could in life. Elizabeth Lesser tells a story about leading a 3-day retreat at a beautiful mountain lodge with a beautiful lake right outside their windows, and Christmas time. So picture snow on the ground and about 50 participants who were all contemplating the direction they wanted their life to take in the next year. The first 2 days of the retreat, there were all kinds of things that were shared, all kinds of really hard, heart-wrenching things that were shared. But there were also some freeing realizations that were shared. The end of that second night, she figured they were winding down. It was snowing outside. One of those beautiful snows where it just kind of drifts to the ground. And she shut off all the lights. And I kind of picture it in a room like this with big windows. She turned off all the lights and they watched quietly, just sat quietly and watched the snow as it bounced off the windows and drifted to the ground or floated down onto the frozen lake. And you know how those moments can just fill you with peace and with a sense of wholeness and healing. There was one woman in this retreat who had been just angry for those first 2 days. Just really stuck in a circle of anger and resentment and misery. And she started to cry as they sat there watching the snow fall. And Elizabeth thought, that's good. Because sometimes to get past the anger, we have to move into grief in order to heal. Well, finally she turned the lights back on and an elderly woman raised her hand, kind of like you do when you're a little kid. And this woman looked different from everybody else. She was older, and she was dressed in a beautifully elegant, tailored blue wool suit. All the other retreat participants are in their sweats and their t-shirts, and she's in this beautiful blue suit. She's got her silver hair tied up in a bun behind her head, and she's got a string of pearls on. And she stands up and she asks if she can say something. And she says, I'm 92 years old. Nobody could believe it. I'm speaking to all of you, but especially to you. And she looked at that angry woman. She said, I've had a life of adventures and a life of losses. I've lost 2 husbands and a son. But at 92, as hard as I try, I can't find anything to be unhappy about. I know now that all of my difficulties made me who I am. Now she leaned forward and looked straight at the angry woman. Do you know the poet Rainier Maria Rilke, dear? He wrote a poem that ends like this. In the difficult are the friendly forces, the hands that work on us. Isn't that wonderful? She said our problems are friendly. They're like the, she said, they certainly, well, where'd it go? They're like the hands that want to work on us. They want to make us strong. So they certainly worked on me. Now, even though I'm an old woman, I'm stronger than ever. Every day I wake up grateful just to be alive. I can do whatever I want. I can watch the birds if I want. I can do nothing if I want. I can be with friends if I want, or read or do nothing at all. Nothing to complain about, nowhere to go, nothing to get. I want to tell you, my dear, that if you get to my age, all of your problems will seem like old friends. I promise you. No one spoke as she sat back down. And just, a couple of people just smiled, and a couple of people had tears in their eyes. And then that angry woman, who was totally unmoved, looked at her and said, are you telling me I've got to wait another 50 years before I can be happy? And the elderly woman just smiled and said, oh dear, don't worry. It will be the 50 fastest years of your life. They do go fast, yeah. I was thinking the same thing, Jim. You know, when we look back, even though our tough times may have been long, don't we look back now and go, gosh, time's flown. I look in the mirror and go, where on earth did all these wrinkles come from? And how did my son get to be 28 years old? How did that happen when I didn't get any older? Inside, anyways. Part of living life wide open means that we learn and we grow from what's happened to us. And we look back in acceptance and say, I am who I am because of all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly. And we find happiness now. So one more quick story. Donna Markova tells a story about her father. Her father was, you know, the quintessential, grew up in the slums of New York and made it to be CEO of Hiram Walker in Chicago by working hard and by being a good person and a charismatic guy. And then when he retired, she said the company spit him out like old chewing gum. And he was lost. He was devastated. He felt useless. He felt like he had nothing to offer. He felt like he didn't matter. When he grew older, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And she went to see him because she thought it might be the last time she'd see him that he would know who she was. And so she flew from Vermont to Florida and walked in to see her father, not the same man that she had remembered him as. You know, the eyes that had been bright and clear and determined were red and hazy, and he was staring off at something that nobody else could see. And sitting in the wheelchair, his strong body was now, you know, shrunken and weak and he was kind of closed up inside himself. You know, when she'd been growing up, he never said he loved her. believing in some weird way that that was going to weaken her somehow. But before she left that day, for the first and only time in her life, first and last time in her life, he said, "I love you, sweetheart." A month later, he passed away while she was home in Vermont. And she melted down. Just the grief came and the tears came. And she cried herself to sleep that night. And she woke up in the middle of the night, feeling the need to write. And as she started to write, she felt like it was something that just flowed out of her. Sort of like a final message from her father. And she wrote this poem, and many of you have probably heard it. I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me, to make me less afraid, more accessible, to loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance, to live so that which came to me as seed goes to the next as blossom, and that which came to me as blossom goes on as fruit. In each of these stories is the message of Easter. It's living life wide open. It's walking out of the tomb and letting it go behind us. It's a part of us, but we don't need to live there. It's about standing up and standing with each other. It's about learning from the things that have happened, and it's about embracing what we have, each and every little moment. Knowing that sometimes embracing them means that we need to lose part of ourselves while we're being ourselves. I have a gift for you. And that's that I've typed up that poem. Because I don't want you to forget. I don't want you to live an unlived life. Carpe diem, seize the day, seize the moment. I'm going to pass these around. I'm going to put it on your refrigerator, stick it on your bathroom mirror. If you need to, throw it in the garbage, but then I know what. Put it in your car, put it somewhere to remind yourself that, yeah, there are Day of Tears days, but then there's Easter. Amen.